Calling to order the Public Works, Finance, and Safety Committee meeting of the Watertown City Council. So with that said, let's establish a quorum. Would our Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien, please call the roll?
Okay. Bueller?
Here.
Danforth? Absent. Holeen?
Here.
Paulson?
Here.
Shuddy? Tupper?
Here.
Vilhauer?
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum established. With that, the chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the consent agenda. Moved by Vilhauer. Seconded by Bueller. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Is there anyone here who would like to address the council on public input? I don't see anyone, so we will move on beyond that. The chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda. Moved by
Second.
Bueller, seconded by Tupper. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All the opposed, nay. Motion carries. Sorry, I was a little quick on the gavel there. It sounds like we're getting a little bit of feedback. Is that someone watching us on computer has their speakers on, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we will continue as best we can. First up on the regular agenda, item A, approval of amendment number 1 of the professional services agreement with HDR Engineering Incorporated for the primary clarifier number 2 replacement project number 2022 in the amount of $254,475 for construction administration for a total engineering services contract of $420,964,000. Need a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Vilhauer. Need a second? Seconded by Bueller. And we'll go to our Assistant City Engineer, Justin Peterson, to kick this one off for us.
Thank you, Mayor. HDR has completed the design of the primary clarifier number 2 project. It was bid on June 23rd, and the council has awarded the contract to KHC Construction for a little over $2.1 million. This agreement before the council is an amendment to the contract with HDR to add construction administration services. The project is expected to take about a year, 12 to 13 months, and includes site inspection and monthly progress meetings. This agreement is very similar to the services that HDR has done with previous projects. The city has budgeted a little over $2.5 million for the primary clarifier project, and with this amendment, the total cost is about a little over $99,000 over budget. But staff believes there's enough in cash reserves in the loan to cover this cost. And with that, Mike Berger and I are online for questions.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll open it up for questions from the council. Councilman Vilhauer, did you have something?
Yeah, I guess I can't help be concerned. I mean, this is just for the engineering services. I mean, it's a 40% increase over and above what was originally contracted, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that's a huge percentage and dollar increase. Any explanation as to what necessitates that, or I guess I need some assurance that it's legit.
Yeah, the original contract was just for design, and then this is the additional construction administration services. Similar. It was a similar type scenario for the wastewater facility administration building. That one is actually a little bit more. The original contract for the wastewater was $300,000. Added another $300,000 for the construction admin. So.
Okay,
I think this is pretty in line.
Oh, I'm sorry. So when we previously approved it, we knew that was not an all-inclusive figure at that point.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, the motion is to approve this amendment. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Moving on to item B, approval of change order number 2, final with HydroClean Incorporated for sanitary sewer rehabilitation project number 1908 for a decrease of $1,442.35 for an overall contract price of $290,567.91. Need a motion? Moved by Dan, moved by Councilman Shetty, sorry,
Second.
and seconded by Councilman Paulson. With that, we'll go back to our Assistant City Engineer for an explanation.
Thank you, Mayor. This change order is to close out the 2019 sanitary sewer rehab project. The contractor had been working on a handful of punch list items over the last year, and during this time, it was discovered that there was a service line that hadn't been opened after repairing the line. What the contractor had done is they had dug up the area, put in the new pipe, and they had went inside to cut out the services and just unfortunately forgot one. So the homeowner did incur some costs associated with this, and because the project hadn't been closed, the city still had some retainage. So after communicating with the contractor, the city paid those costs, and now this change order is formalizing the process to close out the project.
Any questions from the council? Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. My only question is, I see this is a 2-year-old project, and I guess why did it take 2 years?
There was a handful of repairs that needed to be made on the punch list, and it took them until about February this year to complete them.
Is that satisfactory?
I guess a follow-up.
Yes.
I guess going forward on, I guess, other contracts, I know that there's liquidated damages for this type of thing. Was there any liquidated damages discussed for this project?
For the majority of the work was done within the contract time. It was just punch list items that weren't completed.
Any further questions from the council? Questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion is to approve this change order. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Agenda item C, the approval of change order number 1, final for the Boys and Girls Club roof improvements, project number 2033 with Protec Roofing for a net decrease of $13,500 for a new contract amount of $173,813. Need a motion to approve? Moved by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. I believe we are going back to our Assistant City Engineer for this one as well. Justin Peterson, please take it.
So on the screen, you'll see the Boys and Girls Club and the roofs 1, 2, and 3, which were completed as part of this project. This change order was, the project was to remove the ballast on 1, 2, and 3, and then put a EPDM membrane on those. With the information that we had prior to the project, we thought they were all metal roofing. It turns out that roof number 2, right here, was found to have a concrete deck, and so after consulting with the architect, it was recommended to use the ballast on that roof, and the contractor credited $3,500. The other part of the change order is to credit the contingency allowance of $10,000 that we didn't need to use for this project. With reconstructions, there was a chance of uncovering something unexpected, and we didn't experience, other than this roof, we didn't experience any other unexpected items, so the total credit for this change order is $13,500. With that, I'll answer any questions.
All right. Thank you. Any questions from the council? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Has the gym divider curtain been installed?
Yes, it has.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the council? Seeing none, any comments? Councilman Paulson, did you have something? Okay. With that, the motion is to approve the change order. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Moving on to committee agenda item number D, approval of change order number 2 with Gray Construction Company for the airport terminal project number 1927 for an increase of $472,899 for a new project contract amount of $10 million, sorry. Little bit of a difference there, sorry. $10,765,592. Need a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Schutte. That we will go back to our Assistant City Engineer, Justin Peterson.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Before council tonight, it's change order 2 for the airport terminal project. The change order covers several items related to construction of the airport terminal. I'll point out a few of them here. RFP number 7 is related to TSA check-ins and security. RFP 12 if I can get there, is related to the airfield ramp lighting. The FAA asked that the lighting at the back of the plane needs to be a certain brightness, and so this RFP adds that lighting. RFP number 16 revises the design of the office space to account for a second airline. And then the largest item, cost item, deals with the restaurant. That's $240,000 roughly. During design, the restaurant space was purposely left open, kind of as a shell, because at the time we didn't know what needs the restaurant or what needs would be needed in that area. The space would be designed slightly differently if it was, say, a coffee shop versus a full-scale restaurant. The tenant is planning to have a restaurant there, so now we know what those needs are, and the costs here reflect those changes. There's also a credit for just under $46,000. First one there for some channel glass, and we think we'll end up with a really good looking product at the end. Overall total is $472,899, and I believe Jason Kahn of Co-op Architecture and Michael Schmidt of Helms Associates online, and between us three we can answer questions.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Peterson, do you think that either one of those gentlemen would like to speak now or wait for questions?
Hey, Jason.
Hello, Mayor. This is Jason Can with Co-op Architecture. Yeah, I can speak briefly if you would like, and I'm more than welcome are willing to kind of talk through any of these prices along that lines. But as Justin said, several of these items are there's kind of a mix of things. There's a couple things that are just needed to happen based on some items that came up, some coordination issues and stuff like that. There's quite a few items that address some plan changes. The restaurant that was talked about, the revising the space for the second airline, all that kind of stuff. There were a couple of those change orders for TSA. We've had several meetings with TSA kind of over the spring and summer here, kind of outlining a little bit more on what their requirements are for some of these spaces and what they need going forward. So the change orders for that are accommodating what they're going to have to put into their spaces and getting those to work. And there's a few items here that are also just kind of shifting things from phase 2 to phase 1. Just to kind of, Mike with Mike Schmidt with Helms has been kind of massaging those numbers a little bit to make sure that we use as much of that federal funding and stuff as we can. So several of these large ones were actually pieces that were going to be done in phase 2, but we shifted them to this project to try to take advantage of some of that money that we had in this project, with some of the worries that we had about being over budget with the phase 2 stuff and the SRV building that were just bid. So that's what quite a few of these items are. As well. But if you have any questions on any of them, I'm more than happy to answer.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from the council? Or, I'm sorry, did Helms and Associates would like to speak? No. Any questions from the council? Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess just procedurally, before this ever comes to us, these proposed change orders have been vetted by your office, Justin, staff in general. I mean, because we don't know this, understand this at all when it comes to us. But so I guess we're relying upon the process and procedures that goes on in your office. Is that a correct statement?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from the council? I will actually ask a question. 2 questions, actually. One, in your comments, you were describing how some of the cost was to fit the tenant of the restaurant and not knowing who the tenant was going to be. I guess, could you assure me and the public watching that we're building it to fit the tenant that we know we're going to have, but we don't want to lock ourselves out of any potential future tenant. And I know that the needs of a coffee shop would be way different than the needs of the proposed tenant. So I don't want to spend money to limit ourselves in the future, or spending extra money that perhaps not knowing exactly how long that tenant would be there. I guess that would be a question. And then the follow-up question, if you don't mind me asking 2 in 1, would be some of the other dollars were to accommodate the second airline. And that's also something that we can't guarantee is going to be around long term. So I guess I just want some assurance that this is absolutely necessary and it's good protection for public dollars. So I open that up to anyone who would like to answer that one.
Hi, this is Jason Can with Co-op Architecture again. Yeah, I can kind of talk to that a little bit. Basically, with the kitchen stuff, essentially that space, as Justin said, was just shelled. So there was nothing done in there. We didn't have our plumbing in there. We didn't have electrical. We didn't have mechanical, because we didn't know what the loads would be on those things, what sort of sink setup would be required. Obviously, with a somewhere serving food, there's some extra requirements as far as like a veggie sink and a 3-compartment sink and those things, where some of those wouldn't be required with, say, a coffee shop or some of those other things. So that stuff wasn't included. So essentially this RFP takes everything, and we've met with the vendor, once that kind of happened early this summer, late spring, and we had a few meetings with the vendor to kind of to lay this space out, figure out what they need in there. And it actually lays out pretty efficiently. We did have to make a few modifications to things, but the biggest piece is we were able to understand what loads are required. So that price includes the mechanical unit to serve that space. It includes all the electrical, the plumbing. There's 3 built-in sinks. Your required kind of hand washing sink, a 3-compartment sink, and a veggie washing sink. It's got all the wall framing, the ceiling, lighting, all that kind of stuff, because we didn't know what was in there at that point. So it was very much just a shell space. But essentially, you're paying for the everything kind of built in this space. So if a new vendor kind of comes in, it will be set up for a different restaurant or something else to come in. Obviously, if it was the coffee shop down the road, there'd probably be some things that they don't quite need in this type of space down the road. Like there's a big overhead hood, under what will be the pizza oven and that kind of stuff. But all of that stuff is built in and is part of the project, and that will stay there for another tenant who would be coming in. So I would feel pretty good about the space being set up very well for a wide variety of things to come in the future, and be able to utilize those. So. What was the second question again? I apologize.
No, but thank you for that answer. The second question was about the second, us current, or ATY currently having 2 airlines. And
Yes. So that particular space, basically that space right now was set up with an office. There was a little storage room, and then there was kind of just a bigger open space. Um, the redesign actually creates kind of two office areas. So each airline would have its own kind of private office, its own separated kind of workspace, and then there's a shared little kitchenette kind of stuff in between them. It does make it far more delineated, and it separates that space up clearly between the 2 airlines, where with the existing plan it would honestly be a mess to kind of figure that out from a rental agreement and from 2 separate kind of competing companies that probably don't want to be commingling all day long. So from a feasibility standpoint, I think it works much better for the airport. And at this point, it's a very manageable change, where I think if this is something, if there was sustained success between the 2 airlines, or even if one left and someone else came back in the future, it's set up much better, in my opinion, to handle that than it is now. So just from a long-term planning standpoint, we would recommend kind of moving forward with it, just so you have the option to kind of smoothly take on a second airline or keep a second airline, and just given the success that right now that they're seeing, I would hope that that's kind of the case going forward with 2 airlines. So.
all right, thank you very much. Any further questions from the council? Councilman Vilhauer.
Just a comment for the public, and I think for our own use as well. As I understand it, this is grant eligible, so we'll only be paying about, what, 25% or thereabouts of the cost of the change order?
Correct. All of these items are grant eligible. Some of them are eligible 100%. A few of them are eligible. It's kind of broken up where a lot of the site stuff is 100% eligible. A lot of the building related stuff is 74.75% eligible. But all of these items are eligible. Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just want to ensure that we have the funds available for the 111,000 change order. I'm assuming it's part of, what was it accounted for in the what we were talking about previously, but.
Yeah, speaking with Todd Syrie, he mentioned that there's administration funds that were worked into the budget. Basically, it's kind of like contingency, and so yes, there's monies in there to cover it.
I have a question.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Justin, the total responsibility for us then would be that 111,000. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the change order. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Excuse me. Moving on to council agenda item E. Approval of amendment to TIF number 12 development agreement with Parkside Place LLC for a total amount of $145,209.45 for the city's obligations toward the Parkside Place downtown development project. We will go to our city attorney, Matt Roby, to start this one.
Thank you, Mayor. The city in October 20.
Sorry, excuse me. We need a motion to approve this. Thank you. Moved by Councilman Paulson. Seconded by Councilman Schutte. Thank you.
If you had a better parliamentarian, he might have caught that.
He's trying to get out of it.
Wait, our city manager caught it, and the 2 of us who pride ourselves on that, we were just oblivious. So thank you for catching that.
So tax increment financing district number 12 encompasses the property across the street here that you see the project going up here. It's Parkside Place. In October 2020, the council approved a development agreement related to that TIF district part of the development agreement provided for city-paid expenses related to site utility improvements and the removal and replacement of sidewalks and alleys. In that agreement, we capped both of those categories of costs at a specific dollar amount. It was $18,500 related to site utility improvements and $45,500 related to removal and replacement of sidewalks and alleys. The developer now has requested an amendment to the agreement to account for some additional costs related to those categories. And I know that the developer is here, and the assistant city engineer may have some additional details on those requested, on the costs specifically.
Thank you. I think it's appropriate to hear from our staff first. So Assistant City Engineer Justin Peterson, would you like to add anything to this?
These are the list of items that have been requested, dealing with asphalt, parking striping, utilities, staking, and some dirt work. They all kind of generally fall in the category of utilities improvements and removal and replacement of the sidewalk and alley. Totaling the request by the developer is a total of $145,209.45. And yeah, with that, I'll leave it with some questions.
Is there anyone else here to testify on this item? Just make sure you please identify yourself for anyone watching.
Jesse Craig with Craig Development.
And who is with you, Mr. Craig?
Chad Hanish with Infrastructure Design Group.
Thank you.
So when we initially, I'll go through my narrative and I'll let Chad do his deal. When we initially put this together, we were early on in the design process, hadn't finished the civil or anything like that. It's kind of going by the whole vision of Watertown to have cityscaping involved in their projects. I did it on the lofts. I ended up having to pay that out of pocket because, again, that was denied. So we moved forward with this one with the idea of putting cityscaping out front. The sidewalk that was in place was not ADA compliant. So we were going to work in the cityscaping with the new elevations for the city sidewalk. We went back and forth with city engineering. Ultimately, it got denied, even though we warned them of the fact that by raising the elevations, finished floor height of Parkside Apartments, it would have an effect on the alleyway. Because if it was too low, I would have water either running into my parking garage, or I'd have to lower the alleyway, which in then turn I'd have to lower the Gamber parking lot to make that also work. Also on the east side of it, where it butted up against the park, that elevation with the elevations of the park, my building was too low, so we had to work on a walkway, ADA compliant walkway to that back fire escape also. So even with those arguments, it was denied by city engineering to allow us our finished floor height that we wanted. So because of that decision, this is why these costs have really come about. We had to finish way more of the alleyway, the entire alleyway on the north side, when we had planned on only doing half of it because there's no lower parking garage, so we didn't have to tear out as much. Ended up having to lower the alleyway on the south side also, which then affected those buildings that abut that alleyway. And then, of course, like we talked about, the Gamber parking lot had to be taken out also, a good portion of that southwest corner. So that's really constituting the difference in the cost. And then in tearing out the alleyway up against the street, we ran into vaults for the city utilities. So we had to work on, we couldn't jackhammer them and take them out, so we had to work with WMU on that and worked around that, so that added costs. So it's, it's one of those things with working with downtown high density development. We're running constantly into hidden structures, hidden utilities, things that no one knew was there. And, it's hard to put that into a dollar figure before you even break ground. Chad, anything to add?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, we did put together just a simple presentation to kind of step you through the process. If you want to start from the original there. You can go ahead and move to the next one, but again, it kind of steps you through that same process that's already been described. That original request was based on concepts, assumptions went into it, you know, of what's going to be removed to develop that initial agreement, and that was prior to really getting any civil design survey going. So we didn't really know the overall limits when that initial development agreement was in place. So next slide. Once we got into that final civil design, identified the areas of improvements. Jesse highlighted some of those, but this just tries to give you a little visual representation of those additional areas that we did run into associated with just getting grades to work. You can see on the north side, even getting into the parking lot for some site improvements, getting grades to work, that full alleyway. On the west side, we're getting out into the street, all of the sidewalk, parking area to get grades and ADA to work there. So the overall limits of the project just increased to make it work grade-wise. And like I said, you make some assumptions up front for those quantities and those numbers. And then once we got into it, similar to some of the other change orders that have been discussed tonight on some of the other projects, as these projects progress, sometimes the numbers change, the limits change.
I guess the biggest thing I want to note is that, all of these alleyways, sidewalks, and things like that, they all, are added benefits to the public. It doesn't necessarily add any value to my property because I don't own it.
Thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony and open it up to council questions. Councilman Paulson.
So, thank you, Mayor. I guess my first question is, I see that the staff's recommendation is deny. So when I made a motion, are we making a motion to deny, or are we still?
The motion, as written, is to approve, but if we vote it down, then it's basically
Okay.
denied.
So-
So you're not, just because someone makes the motion does not mean you are for the motion. It's just to open debate upon it, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just clarifying
Yep.
that we're not moving to deny it, we're moving to approve it, and then
Yep.
if we deny it. then-
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So then can I follow up with a couple questions then?
Yes, please.
So I see on the supporting documents that this $145,209.45 actually replaces the $65,000 that was originally directed towards this TIF.
Correct.
So we're essentially increasing this by $80,000.
Correct.
So,
Well,
thank you. Mr. Craig, I guess my question, I guess I'm going to come back to you at is, how did engineering factor into this? You had mentioned that engineering was a key factor in some decisions that increase this cost. So can you go into depth about that?
Yeah, we had initial conversations with Heath Von Eye, and then it got handed over to Stacy Burgard. And so the emails were back and forth with Stacy. I don't know if she was utilizing or relying on Heath or a third party that you guys contract with to make a lot of those decisions, but there was no definitive answer as to why they denied it. I don't know if they didn't feel it was needed, but the ADA was definitely needed on the original sidewalk that was in there. You couldn't get a wheelchair onto it or keep it on there. The grade was just too severe. And then the cityscaping, again, I paid the money to design it based on, when I first came down to Watertown and until lately, when every time you walked in the city hall, the whole board was cityscaping, bump outs. That was the whole vision. So we designed that. Like I said, I paid for that, and then that got denied also. So did the lofts one also. So, and like I said, I paid that one out of pocket to the tune of about 20 grand. And recently just paid for all the flowers and grasses and stuff to be put in those also, because that wasn't approved by budget.
Follow up? Councilman Tupper.
Do we have any reasoning why it was denied? Staff denied?
City engineer?
What Jesse's referring to is there was a mid-block bump out right here. It is what was originally submitted, and it was, as engineering, we feel that the mid-block bump out was appropriate at that location, so that's why it was denied.
Follow up, Councilman Tupper?
That's to the tune of $80,000 difference?
I'm trying to recall a timeline in my head. I believe that even with the bump out, there was still alley modifications all along the north side there.
Mr. Craig, I'd give you the leeway to answer that question.
Yeah, there was not as extensive as amount because the cityscaping allows to raise the elevation, which then would allow us to bring the building up versus drop it down. When we had to match the ADA or the sidewalk, make those ADA compliant, that we took it and had to tip it down towards the building, which then again, in order to get the ADA from the sidewalk into our front door without a step, which isn't allowed by ADA, we had to lower the entire building. If we'd have done the bump out, would have raised that, it would have raised the city sidewalk, and then our building would have been fine. So we would have had to replace half the alleyway on the north side because we had to excavate. But we wouldn't have had to replace the whole thing. And we definitely wouldn't have had to go into the Gamber parking lot. And that was pointed out in several emails. They were warned about that because it's a domino effect.
Councilman Paulson? Well, actually, does anyone else wish to ask a question before Councilman Paulson asks the second one? Councilman Paulson.
Thank you. This is a follow-up to, so if you had to raise the city sidewalk, was there tie-in issues to the existing sidewalk on either side?
Correct. Yeah, to the north and south.
So there would have been issues there. Is that what you're saying?
The way it is right now, no, if we would have, all we'd have to do is make it flat, but it wouldn't have affected the north and south.
Okay.
Any further questions? Councilman Schutte.
Thank you, Mayor. This may be for the city engineer. If there's any other businesses downtown that that want to work on their sidewalks, make them ADA approved, that would be at the cost of the building owner, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just granted, this is a new construction project and working through all the ins and outs and the unknowns, but I know you mentioned the sidewalks and ADA approved, and it's more for the, not for the building itself, for building owners, more for the city sidewalks, just making sure that that cost generally is for the businesses themselves do pay for that, for getting the sidewalks correct and updating and whatever it takes.
Well, but a municipality, I mean, by federal law, they should, honestly, should
Actually,
walk every
Mr. Craig, I'll rule that out of order.
sorry.
There wasn't a question asked, but if Councilman Schutte wants to open it up to, I mean, it was asked to our city engineer, but if you wanted to open that up to allow Mr. Craig to answer that as well, you sure can.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Well, and I'd even rely on Matt Roby. I mean, by federal law, they have to be ADA compliant. A wheelchair needs to be able to get into any business. And that's a city-owned sidewalk, not a business-owned sidewalk. So, I mean, from the city standpoint, all of that should be ADA compliant. It shouldn't have fallen on the business to come and make the city aware of it, to be honest with you. Matt?
Actually, I'll rule that out of order as well. All questions come through the chair, so.
Sorry, Mayor.
Would our city attorney care to answer that or shed light on this issue?
You know what? I mean, I think that initial sidewalk construction is typically the responsibility of developers. And it's the responsibility of developers to make sidewalks ADA compliant. Now, in this case, it was part of an economic development agreement that we were agreeing to pick up certain costs. So to answer Councilman Chuddy's question, typically that is the developer's responsibility, and it's their responsibility to meet those ADA requirements.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Mr. Craig, even though staff turned you down, you felt like it was still necessary to go through and incur the costs that you did to rectify the situation that you felt needed to be done, correct?
It's either that or stop the project.
Okay. Now, did staff have any input at all throughout your process as far as the costs and the procedures that would be done to meet what you felt needed to be done?
We had talked about the generalization, but we hadn't bid anything. It was denied, so they didn't look at the costs involved in it. And it was, again, I was dealing with Stacy, who and again, tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't a licensed engineer. So it just felt like she was relying on a third party, which is the same kind of route we go when we're doing building plan submittals and permit submittals. That's the same thing, is it's contracted out to a third party. They make the determination on it and then send it back to the city, and then the city sends it to me, and then I give it to my engineers and architects, and we go back and forth like that. So I don't know if that was the case. Stacy's not online, I don't think, to weigh in on that, but there was no cost analysis just because it was denied immediately.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Jesse, what part of the cost that you're requesting here would be directly a part of the ADA compliance construction? How much of that?
Yeah, don't necessarily have a breakout of that, but
Just a kind of a good estimate, I guess, what I'd be asking for, if you could do that.
the west side would be majority of that. Well, west and east side, I guess, would be the majority of that ADA. So just by just looking at sheer area, that's, a good half or not more of that. But, it's a ripple effect because all of the sides are connected. And so what you do you got to kind of chase that through grade-wise throughout the site. So that's where it becomes kind of difficult to give you a definitive number there.
Councilman Paulson?
Can I make statements? I guess
Yes, it's open now to.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Comments.
So I guess my where I'm leaning is this was part of an agreement that we made as a city, as a financing, as our portion to them. So we're replacing it, and obviously it's increasing. But based on staff decisions, it was. I mean, he couldn't have avoided these costs. So are we going to penalize? And this is just a rhetorical question to the council here: is are we going to penalize a developer because of decisions that were out of his control?
Councilman Vilhauer.
I would like to propose a substitute motion in lieu of what's on the table right now. I would like to propose or move that we pay for, $64,000 was the original agreed upon amount. $80,000 is roughly the amount at issue here. I'd propose a motion to split that difference and increase the $64,000 to $104,000. I feel like there was some blame on both sides. I don't like the communication that was. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I should stop with my motion and get a second.
I would say that that's not a substitute motion. That is an amendment to the main motion. So with taking the liberty of interpreting your desire, I would say the amended motion from Councilman Vilhauer would be to change the total amount to $104,209.45. Would that be?
If you want to split it precisely, fine. I use 104,000.
Just make it easy. Let's just say 104,000. So the amended motion would be to strike $145,209.45 and insert $104,000.
I would second that.
The motion is moved by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Tupper. Now, we are limited to questions and comments only upon the amended motion at this time, not the overall motion, just the amendment. And I will allow the councilman who made the amendment to, or made the proposal to comment.
I started to make the comment that I'm essentially splitting the difference here. Looks like there was, I find some fault in both sides here. Looks like there was some part of this that maybe we should have done or allowed for. By the same token, I didn't like the fact that the work was done without getting approval and getting some cost estimates by the developer before it was done, and now the builder submitted to us. So that's why I'm proposing to split the difference.
Any further comments or questions about the amendment? Seeing none, we are going to vote on the amendment. This isn't on the overall approval of this agenda item. This is just upon the amendment to change the wording from 145,000 to 104,000. So all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So now we are upon discussion of the original approval of agenda item E as amended. Councilman Paulson.
I was saying nay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say nay?
Yeah.
I did not hear you. I'm sorry. I will. I am comfortable as long as the person voting nay recognizes himself. I mean, I don't think we need a roll call on that. Okay, thank you very much. The item is still amended to 104,000. Any comments or questions about the overall motion now, as amended? Seeing none, we will move to voting. I will call a roll call on this, thinking that there might be some dissension. So,
Okay.
Councilman Bueller, did you have a comment before we go
I just
to
want to
vote?
make sure I understand that we're voting on the original amendment right now.
Yes, thank you. Good question. We are voting upon, so what we are voting on right now is, and I will read it out, approval of amendment to TIF number 12 development agreement with Parkside Place LLC for a total amount of $104,000 for the city's obligations toward the Parkside Place downtown development project. That is what we are voting for right now. So if you vote for this, you are voting to give $104,000 essentially.
Thanks
That's
for
the
clarifying,
approval.
Mayor. Thank you.
With that said, I will call a roll call vote on this one.
Okay. Bueller? Danforth is absent. Holleen? Paulson?
No.
Shetty?
Aye.
Tupper? Vilhauer?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. We are on to old business now. Any old business? Any new business? We do have a need. We will go into executive session. This will be as a city council executive session, but we're just in the interest of time saving, we are going to go in executive session now before our city council meeting. But in order to do so, well, I need a motion to go into executive session, correct? All those in favor, moved by Bueller, seconded by Shetty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. And then, should I adjourn as well?
No, you're just.
No, you have to keep the meeting is still ongoing, just
Yeah, and we will not be taking any action coming out of this executive session. So stay tuned and we will see you at City Council.